Hi, this is David from Minute Earth. Recently, we made a video about how life expectancy numbers are misleading, and how graphs can tell us way more about how long animals are likely to live. In that video, we looked at survival curves of dogs, sea turtles, and modern humans. But you curious creatures wanted to know not just about modern humans, but also how human survival has changed over time. So we dug into the data to create survivorship curves for humans throughout history. Or at least we tried. It's almost impossible to get this sort of data for all humans throughout time. In many places, the records got destroyed, they weren't kept in the first place, or they were only kept for the rich and the royals. The group that had the most complete data, perhaps not surprisingly, was white males from the post-colonial United States. That means our data represents only a tiny fraction of a percent of the humans who have ever lived, and is a pretty skewed sample. But there are some definite takeaways, like getting old isn't new. In the early 1800s, the average life expectancy of white men in the US was only 42. Yet US President John Adams was 90 when he died in 1826. It's not like back then men in their 30s were senior citizens. Healthy 30-year-olds looked more or less like 30-year-olds have always looked. It's just that larger numbers of young people used to die from war and disease, skewing the average. If we think about our midlife survival in relation to that of other animals, white male Americans in the 1800s were more like wolves, many of which die from fights and infections, while white male Americans today are more like domestic dogs, which rarely die in the prime of their lives. But here's something else worth noting. Up through the 1960s, only about a third of the white male Americans who made it to 60 would reach 80. After 60, people's bodies and odds of surviving went downhill quickly, sort of like wild sheep who die off quickly after reaching middle age. Today though, way more than half of white male Americans, and indeed humans in general, who make it to 60, make it to 80 and beyond. We now age more like whales do. We have lots of good years late in life. But while whale longevity is thought to be due to special mutations that help with DNA repair, in modern humans, it's mostly thanks to the development of drugs that fight pneumonia, which used to be the #1 killer of old folks. But the biggest changes in human survivorship over the last 200 years have happened at the other end of our lives. Here. I mean, we all know that we've reduced infant mortality, but the actual numbers are truly incredible. In the early 1800s, almost a quarter of white male Americans died in their first year of life due to birth complications, infections, and poor sanitation. They had about the same odds of survival as some baby birds do. But 200 years later, thanks to breakthroughs like widespread access to hospital care, childhood vaccinations, and clean drinking water, very few white male American babies died. We've also seen huge gains for those outside this admittedly non-representative group. Worldwide, human infant mortality has dropped to less than 3%. Of course, those gains aren't evenly distributed, and there's a ton of work to do to ensure that all babies have the best chance of survival. But pretty much everywhere in the world, infant mortality rates are continuing to improve. By 2100, it's expected that 99% of all kids will make it to their first birthday. And that curve is like no other animal. This video was sponsored by Fabulous. Developing good habits and sticking to them is super hard, but the Fabulous app uses proven methods from behavioral science research to teach you how to turn tiny repeatable tasks you can do every day into all sorts of lasting useful habits. I've just started using Fabulous to improve my sleep schedule, which has gotten a little shaky over the last year or so. In addition to little steps to get started, like no social media before bed for 3 nights this week, it also shows me the roadmap I'm going to follow all the way to my goal. If you want to develop better habits using strategies backed by behavioral economics research, you can download the app using the link in the description box. The first 100 people who click on the link will get a free 1-week trial and 25% off a Fabulous subscription. Thanks, Fabulous!